If you're using surrogacy or donor conception to build your family, and you lie awake at night wondering, is my child really going to be okay? Then this episode is for you. Today, I'm going to walk you through the research and the things that you need to know about raising children conceived with donor conception or surrogacy and how to understand the process better. From our Building Your Family community, this is the Building Your Family podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Schumann, author, researcher, and reproductive medicine therapist. If you've been following me for a while, then you know I've seen thousands of people in this situation. And so if you listen to what I can share with you today, it might help you feel a little bit better. The first thing I want you to know is that you can be upset about using donor conception or surrogacy to build your family and love your child and have a wonderful family. It's absolutely possible. One thing has nothing to do with the other. You see, what happens is as you're on your family building journey, you may be upset about using donor conception, let's say, to have a child because you wanted to use your genetics or because you never imagined it. And of course you didn't imagine it. Most people don't grow up thinking, I'm going to use donor conception to have a baby one day. It's a shock for most people, even people who are planning it, people who are in single parent situations or queer relationships. Even for them, it's not a comfortable thing typically to choose the genetics of somebody that you don't know to build the most intimate relationship of your life. That's a relationship with your child, right? And so it can feel uncomfortable. And the degree to which it feels uncomfortable is often the degree to which you worry about things. You may worry, am I going to bond with my child? What if the child doesn't look like me or have my family lineage? What if the child looks at me and doesn't see me as the real parent? What if the child is different than other kids? There are so many worries that people stay up at night worrying about and thinking about. And it's very difficult to imagine, how can I have those feelings that feel so negative and at the same time really love my child? Well, I'll explain it to you. As you go through the process of fertility treatment, there's often two issues. One is that you don't have the child that you want. You're not parenting, or maybe you are pursuing a second pregnancy and you assumed that it would work out well and it's not. So there is some feeling of disappointment and wanting. On the other side, you are in a situation where things are not working out the way that you want them to. You may need surrogacy, or you may need to use the genetics of somebody that you don't know to have a child. And that can be stressful. And so when you're going through treatment, both of these things are interlocked. They feel like the same pain, but they're actually not. Because once you pursue this, if you do, and it's not right for everyone, but if you do pursue it, these two issues are going to separate. You will be a parent. You're going to love being a parent. You're going to love your child. Your child's going to love you. You're going to have such a great time doing all the things that you wanted to do. At the same time, are you still going to have moments where you're upset that maybe your child doesn't have your dimples or doesn't have your mother's curly hair? You might. And in fact, your child might also be upset. Your child might say, Mom, you know what? You have the most beautiful eyes. I wish I had your color eyes. And you can say, you know what, honey, I wish you did too, because that would be nice if we could share that together. That would be fun, but it's not necessary. We love each other. This is how we had to build our family, and it's okay. So this loss can happen and we can live with it. But when you're in the thick of it, when you're first starting, it's hard to imagine that, right? And so very often when people go through this process, it's also very hard to imagine disclosing to their child. And if you're very upset about using donor conception, it's going to be even harder for you to choose a donor and to disclose to your child. But disclosing to your future child about their origins is the single best thing that you can do for them. So let's talk a little bit about the research. So years ago in the US, there were many people who were adopted. And those adoptions went through pretty well. They had a very good system in place. However, these parents who were adopting the children were often told by the agencies, don't tell your child that they were adopted, or they were told, tell them as little as possible. And so, of course, the parents said, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to do what I've been told. And then these children grew up to adults and they said, I was really unhappy with not being told. And what were their problems? Their problems were number one, they felt that their parents weren't honest with them. So they had this distrust for their family and felt like if they're not telling me this, then maybe they're not telling me everything. Maybe there are other things that I have to worry about. And sometimes they felt very angry and resentful about that. They also sometimes, but not always, felt that it affected their identity formation. So if you're looking at your parents and thinking, these are the people who I'm connected to genetically, and I grew in my mom's tummy, and this is the way I came into the world. And then all of a sudden you grow up and you find out that there's other parts of the story that you don't know, then you very often have to recalibrate who you are in the world. And that recalibration can be very difficult for some people. Some people find that they have an identity crisis because of it. Now, we've seen lots of people, including celebrities, talk about their donor conception story, saying that they forgive their parents. They know that their parents didn't know any better because when we got to this place in donor conception, where there were many donor conceived children being born, we had to learn the same lesson that we learned in adoption. And we didn't. The doctors, the agencies, the clinics, everyone felt that people didn't need to tell their children. And so all over again, these kids were faced with the same problem. So if you look at stories that can feel like horror stories of donor conceived children who are older, you often feel that you're looking at these adults who are dissatisfied, angry with their parents, upset about their journey, all sorts of things. But if you look at the younger people who are donor conceived, you can see on this podcast and other places that they're actually very well adjusted. We can see that they do very well in life. And the extent to which their family feels comfortable with the fact that they were donor conceived is also the extent to which they can broach these issues like disclosure with their children. Now, one other reason we found that this is so important is because when the child feels like you're disclosing to them openly, they also feel this connection, this rapport, this openness. They don't feel afraid to go to their parents with questions. They don't feel like their parents are going to shut them down. And that was a major study that was done in adoption some time ago that's been brought to the donor conception field. And if you are interested in learning more about that, we have a fantastic episode with Vasante Javda, who's a researcher, and you can hear more about this. But basically, the idea is they compared people who could connect with their birth parents, these were adopted kids, and gave them full openness in their relationship so they could ask them whatever questions they wanted. They were able to talk to them whenever they felt like it and were able to satisfy their curiosity. Then they compared these children to children whose parents were very open with them. So they had this level of connectedness and openness in their communication with each other, and they were able to talk to their children easily and openly without any issues. And so they said, which one is most important? Well, they felt like both were important, that giving your child an option to meet the person who shares their genetics is important. For some children, they want to, some children, they don't, but giving them that option is important. But the openness within the family, the level of open communication and comfort with discussing this topic was even more important to the children. Your relationship with your child is going to be the most important thing to them. And so they really need to feel like they can come to you anytime. So, what do we know about all of this? What we know is that being able to share openly and honestly is really important. And we have an episode on disclosure. You can take a look at the 4 steps to disclosure and ways to think about a framework that can help. But it's very important to think about this way ahead of time. If you can think about it when you're starting to conceive, or even when you're pregnant, or when the baby's little, it's essential. And people say to me, well, why would I do that? The baby's not going to understand this when the baby's an infant. And that's true. However, you will have a chance to practice. And why is that so important? Well, as I said earlier, this is an awkward situation for most people. For most people, this doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel comfortable to use a donor to conceive. And for many people, it's an emotional leap to be able to even accept it. And so if you're feeling like that and you start talking to your child about their origins, it would be very natural for you to trip over your words, to hem and haw, to feel a little uncomfortable, and to have a hard time getting your footing and feeling like you can communicate a story that feels good to you, right? There are lots of good books, and I have them on my website, familybuilding.net, so you can take a look at some books, but you really want to find something that speaks to you. And sometimes you may want to sleep on it. You may want to think about, well, maybe I want to do it a little bit differently than I thought, or maybe my partner wants to do it differently and we want to compromise. So there may be times where you want to change your story, you want to mold it, you want to configure it. Maybe you have some tears about your infertility. Maybe you stumble over your words because it makes you anxious. But through all of this, you get better and better at practicing. And that way, by the time your child hears the story and starts to understand the words, and of course, they're not going to understand the full concepts yet, but they'll understand the words. When they do, it will roll off your tongue much more easily. And that is very important because if your child hears you stumbling over your words and hemming and hawing about this situation, chances are they're not going to say, well, my parents really love me, and that's why they seem so anxious. Your child's much more likely to say, why are they acting so strange if this is a normal thing? So, to prevent that, if you can start to practice over and over again, then you can have the ability to take your time, work things out with your partner, and get to a place where you're comfortable. And then, as you feel more and more comfortable with your child, you will communicate this openness. You will love them so much and want everything for them. Now, if you're not a parent yet, it's going to be hard to imagine, how am I going to want my child to learn more about my donor? Well, think about this. If your child finds something that they love and they think this is the greatest thing ever, maybe it's a friend's toy, maybe it's some food that they love so much, you will tear apart the planet to try to get that for your child, right? So you can imagine that, but you can't imagine having a donor and feeling good about talking to your child about having a donor because you haven't experienced that. And it's not really in our world. You haven't been raised with it, but you will feel the same. If your child says to you, I really don't understand why I have curly hair and you don't, you're going to want to help your child figure that out. And certainly for medical reasons, over time, you're going to want to help your child understand what they need to know about their health. And donors are healthy. Donors are young and they've passed screening and they're going to be healthy people. But health does change over time. And it's really important to know that if you can get your donors' information as they grow older, you can keep track of their medical issues, and that's good information for your child. So you're going to want to have all this for your child. It's just hard now. So if you're feeling like, I don't know how this is going to unravel because I can't imagine ever feeling good about using donor conception, you need to know that you don't need to feel good about it. You need to be able to just take a step in the right direction. So what can you do? Well, there's three things that you can do. Number one, replace negative self-talk with research. So when you start thinking, I can't ever imagine this, this is not going to work out for me, there's got to be something wrong with the fact that I don't like the idea of using a donor. Isn't that going to translate to my child? It's not. As I said, these two issues are going to separate, and you can continue to work out your own personal issues, not belonging to your child, your own personal issues through this loss. while you still love your child. Your child is going to look at you like you're the parent. You're the only parent your child's ever known, and they don't know the difference. This is your issue to deal with. So you can work on this issue and still love your child. And as you start to question that, or as you start to think about all of the things that can go wrong, I urge you to take a look at the research. You can certainly look at our other videos, look inside of our community and take our courses and find out for yourself what other people experience. It can be enormously helpful. Number two, decide. It could be one small step, but decide who you want to share this information with and who you want to work it out with. So if you have a partner, it may be your partner. It may also be your closest friend. It may be your therapist. It could be anyone in your life who really cares and understands the research so that you can start to work through some of these issues with that person. And if it's your partner, for example, you're going to want to think through, how are we going to manage this situation? Because it's not the fact that you have a donor conceived child that is the issue. It's the fact that you have to handle how to have a donor conceived child. That's the issue. And if you can handle it well, and it doesn't have to be perfect, like any part of parenting, you can't be perfect. So if you can handle it, and manage some of these things, you can be a wonderful parent and your child can have a wonderful life and you can be a beautiful family. So think about some of the ways that you and your partner or you and your friend or your support system, whoever they are, will manage this together and try to work out some ideas as a team. Number three, learn about privacy versus secrecy. We have a whole episode on that subject, but it's really important. If you are feeling raw with all of this and it's really hard for you, it's going to be important to try to keep some of the details of this close to your chest because not everybody handles it well. Some people might say things that are hurtful. Some people may look at you, being the person who's not genetically connected to the child, as not the real parent. There are all sorts of things that can feel hurtful when you tell the greater public. So, what's important to think about is between you and your partner, how are you going to handle conversations with people outside of your immediate support group? And it doesn't have to be forever. It has to just be enough so that you can start to feel more and more comfortable over time. It's essential that your child knows right away, but it's not essential that the whole world knows right away. You're not obligated to post it on Facebook and tell your neighbor and tell everybody every detail about who your donor is or how you chose your donor or what your process was like. It's not your responsibility to do that. It's only your responsibility to talk to your child about it. So beyond that, you need to think about, how am I going to feel if people know who's a genetically linked parent? Am I going to be upset by that? How am I going to feel if people are staring at me and staring at the child and wondering who's genetically related at the Thanksgiving table? You need to think about lots of different scenarios where you might feel uncomfortable sharing this information. And over time, your child, as they grow older, will need to share this information themselves and make a decision about who they want to tell and who they don't want to tell. But until then, it's your decision to make. And as you start to develop more and more comfort with this story, which you will, it will become easier for you. But it's really important, especially in the beginning, if you're feeling insecure or vulnerable or raw with this information, that you think about your privacy and not push yourself to speak to people about your journey in ways that are going to make you uncomfortable. So let's now recap with 3 short ideas. Number 1, all of the research we have now is showing that more and more people are feeling comfortable talking to their children about their origins. And we see that children do much better when their parents talk to them early and often and have an open line of communication with them. And the child doesn't feel uncomfortable coming to them, and they have set up an environment of support around this topic. Number 2, how we talk to our child and support them around this topic is far more important than almost anything else, including who you choose as a donor. And it's not necessary to tell the whole world, but it is necessary to tell your child when they're very young and to practice as much as you can so you can get comfortable with it. Number 3, having mixed feelings about using donor conception or even surrogacy to have a child does not disqualify you from being a good parent. In fact, you can be a wonderful parent and have all the same joys and hardships as any other parent and have a fantastic journey with your children. This is really important to remember. Your issues around donor conception or surrogacy are really yours to deal with. They don't belong to your children. You will have a beautiful life with them. And if you would like more support or education, please join our community. We have a huge resource in there of courses and support rooms and workshops and downloadable materials and so much more to help you on this journey. I hope this helped, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this was helpful to you. And if you'd like more personalized support, more information, and more education, you can find it in the show notes under the Building Your Family community. We'd love to see you inside. And if you were interested in today's topic, you will really like this video.